Two of America's biggest earthquake faults might be linked to each other. Provocative analysis of seafloor cores suggests that quakes on the Cascadia Fault off California can trigger tremors on the San Andreas Fault. We know that's the area of the subduction of the Pacific Plate under the North American Plate, and San Andreas Fault takes up 75% of the subduction pressure, and the Walker Lane Fault system parallel to that, to its east, is what takes up the other 25% of the subduction pressure. Walker Lane Fault system has all the high threat volcanoes of California. Now, a controversial study argues that at least 8 times in the past 3,000 years, earthquakes made a 1-2 punch off the west coast of the United States. A quake hit the Canadian fault, the Cascadia Fault off the coast of North California, and it triggered a second quake on the San Andreas Fault just to the south. And in some cases, the delay between the quakes may have been decades long. Now we know that this is what happened with the 6.3 earthquake a few days, or a day or so before the Ridgecrest earthquake. Okay, the Vancouver earthquake happened a day or so before the Ridgecrest earthquakes. Now, the study suggests that Cascadia, which scientists think is capable of unleashing a magnitude 9 earthquake at any time, could set off earthquakes on the northern San Andreas, which runs under the San Francisco Bay area. We had a big earthquake there in San Francisco Bay when, of course, there were not that many residents there in 1906. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. Several earthquake scientists told Nature more work needed to confirm this idea. Researchers considered that the two faults seismically are separate. Chris Goldfinger, a geologist and paleoseismologist at Oregon State University in Corvallis, presented the findings at a meeting of the American Geophysical Union in San Francisco. He said, "This is mostly a circumstantial case. I don't have a smoking gun on this, but there are tantalizing clues." Goldfinger and his colleagues first suggested in 2008 that earthquakes in the southern part of Cascadia could trigger quakes on the northern San Andreas. The scientists reported finding layers of churned up sandy sediment in seafloor cores drilled offshore. These layers, called turbidites, usually form when earthquakes shake the seafloor, causing underwater landslides. The researchers reported finding turbidites in Cascadia that seemed to form just before similar turbidites near the San Andreas, perhaps as a Cascadia quake triggered a San Andreas quake. But it was hard to pinpoint exactly when the turbidites had formed, and Goldfinger knew he needed more evidence. He says, "So that's what we did. We went out and got more cores," he said. Now he has the data from 7 cores drilled offshore in southern Cascadia and 7 cores drilled near the northern San Andreas. The two sites are around 100 kilometers apart, close enough to feel shaking from both faults. At 8 places on both sets of cores, Goldfinger spotted unusual 2-layered turbidites and realized that they were telling him something new. He said, "Finally, the lights went on for me. The 2-layered turbidites has to be 2 earthquakes recorded together." Of course, doubts still remain. As Goldfinger sees it, a Cascadia quake shook the coastline first, causing landslides that show up in both sets of cores as the first layer of turbidites. Then at some time later, at a later point, the northern San Andreas also shook, causing the second turbidite layer to form. Jason Patton, engineering geologist with California Geological Survey in Sacramento, co-authored this paper in 2008, said, "This story is pretty convincing. Cascadia turbidites are covered by San Andreas turbidites, so the Cascadia turbidites are deposited first." Again, that's what we saw with the Vancouver earthquake before the Ridgecrest earthquake. Now, others are reserving judgment. Turbidites show that the ground shook at some point in the past, but it's difficult to tell exactly when or where these earthquakes happened. This is what Joan Gomberg says, seismologist at U.S. Geological Survey, Seattle, Washington. And she says, all this uncertainty leaves multiple, equally plausible interpretations on the table, most of which are not sensational. She says, for instance, the turbidites could have been formed by unrelated quakes happening anywhere across the seismic active Pacific Northwest. Ross Stein, a seismologist with the earthquake preparedness firm Trembler in Redwood City, California, wants to see detailed modeling of how stress from the Cascadia fault might be transferred to the northern San Andreas, because they're so close, obviously. Researchers generally agree that a large earthquake can sometimes trigger another on a nearby fault, obviously, because it's like pieces of a puzzle shaking together, by transferring stress and bringing the second fault closer to failure. But it's not clear whether that might happen between southern Cascadia and the northern San Andreas, Stein says. And Goldfinger did also give this information at a conference. He says, I'm just laid it out there. I laid the case out there. And I'm going to also give you the ShakeOut scenario, Ventura, California, for you to enjoy as well. This is by Alexander Weitz on Nature Magazine on Embedded Reality. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Okay, this is the ShakeOut scenario, Ventura, detailed perspective, is by SCEC, the Great Southern California ShakeOut earthquake drill. It's based on a magnitude 7.8 earthquake. Scenario earthquake on San Andreas Fault, Southern California, and this portion of the San Andreas Fault has been identified as the most likely source of a very large earthquake in California. Working group on California earthquake probabilities, and as part of the earthquake drill computer simulations of the ground shaking, and you can see that towards the end of the, after the 130-second point, you'll see that it's amazing how even the seashore goes in and out, and the whole thing is inflating and deflating. So as part of the earthquake drill computer simulation of the ground shaking from this scenario earthquake were constructed through a collaboration effort between USGS and Southern California Earthquake Center, SCEC, which involves researchers from USGS, URS Corporation, San Diego State University, and Carnegie Mellon University. And these computer simulations capture the shaking at length scales larger than about 300 feet and provide detailed pictures of the shaking for the scenario earthquake. The 7.8 earthquake scenario ruptures 186 miles of the San Andreas Fault from Bombay Beach at the edge of the Salton Sea in the south to Lake Hughes northwest of Palmdale in the north. The final slip offset across the fault ranges from 6 to 23 feet, and the colors in the movies indicate the peak intensity of the shaking up to the current time at each location. And you can see the explanation of the colors in the description of the color scheme. The movies available in 2 different resolutions. The images and movies are public domain. Okay, this is by USGS Geological Survey and the Southern California Earthquake Center, SCEC. And I'll leave links below for you for this, so you can understand. Look at this shaking here. We're into 150 seconds. Look at the coastline. Okay, this is a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. Again, the West Coast is one of the most seismically prone areas of the world, subduction of the Pacific Plate under the North American Plate. All of you there, please be careful. Thank you for your support. Please leave your comments. Thank you.